Show. We can listen to Dave till our ears get sore, from West Virginia to Singapore. Miss our friends who ain't here no more. We'll see him over on the other shore. From hooping shooters and smoking crack to recovery and long road back, we got Joey Pepper and the great Cormac. Thanks for listening, come on back. Tune on into the Dopey Show if you're really high or feeling low. If you need a friend, you know where to go. Tune on into the Dopey Show.
Before we get into this episode of Dopey on drugs, addiction, and dumb shit, I just want to say that this episode is brought to you by Aloe Recovery, located in sunny Southern California in Malibu and Silver Lake. Aloe is an amazing recovery center. It was created by our friend Bob Forrest and Evan Haynes and this guy Bob. And basically it got created because they knew that drug addicts needed a place to go where they were going to get not only really, really high-level care, but respect and a feeling that people wanted them there, like that they were more than dollar signs. The staff has a combined 675 years of experience treating addiction and mental health problems. They use state-of-the-art pharmacology for their detox services, making their clients as comfortable as they can be. Amazing family program, registered nursing staff. The doctors are board-certified addictionologists. It seems like a great place to go if you are fucked and you need help. I know somebody who's going, and he is very excited about going, and we're going to hear about that later today. If you guys need help and you are, struggling with substance abuse, go check out Aloe. Their motto is connection, not control, and if that didn't convince you, their amenities include surfing, horseback riding, they have a sweat lodge, and they have sound bath meditations, whatever that is. But it sounds pretty amazing. So again, if you're fucked, go to Aloe. And tell them that Dave from Dopey sent you. And now, back to the show. Hello, and welcome to Dopey, the podcast about drugs, addiction, and dumb shit, and I am Dave. When Chris and I started making this show many years ago, there were two people that we really wanted to have on the show. This father and son writing team, Nick and David Sheff. Nick, of course, wrote Tweak and We All Fall Down. And David Sheff wrote Beautiful Boy and Clean. And after many, many years of courting David Sheff, right? Has it been many years? And maybe not to you. Maybe to you it's been many months. But here he is, David Sheff. Welcome to the show.
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you. I'm so glad we are talking. And I don't think it's been many years, but whatever it's been too long. So weird shit is what, I'm ready.
I think I've been courting you and you haven't noticed. I think I'm such a terrible pursuer that you've only noticed for months. But
okay, well, maybe so. That's it. Okay, I don't have to take any responsibility. I'm cool with that.
You could take responsibility for the last couple weeks or months, but I'll take responsibility for the beginning. But I'm a great fan of yours. I'm a great fan of yours, and I'm very excited to have you on the show. Now, if you guys don't know, this movie just came out a few months ago called Beautiful Boy. And if you don't know, David, we have this podcast about drugs, addiction, and dumb shit, and we have this pretty big following. and they call themselves, or we call them, the Dopey Nation, and the Dopey Nation calls themselves the Dopey Nation. And they were talking about the movie Beautiful Boy a lot, and they were talking about how sad it made them, or how I guess self-aware of the shit, how they affected their parents. I bet you hear a lot of that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, I do, and it's some of that's been really cool because people have said, they've seen the movie, they've seen themselves in the movie, whether it was, they were in the role of the father, meaning that, he was watching somebody who they love, addicted and in trouble, or vice versa. They were, and it's not just kids, it could be brothers, sisters, parents, whatever it is, who were addicted and spiraling downward and becoming aware that they had an impact on their, whoever it was, their family, their parents, whatever. But the only sort of negative thing about that is, the whole story hopefully is not about guilt. Addiction, I guess people who do become addicted. I know Nick, talked a lot about how much shame he felt and how bad he felt and how guilty he felt. But, looking back, I realized that, he was addicted, and it was not like he was, any sort of morally corrupt person, and the idea that guilt comes with this is unfortunate. But, we know that it does.
Right, the guilt and the shame. I went to treatment years ago. The last time I was in treatment was, I want to say, 8 years ago now. And I think that was right.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. That was right around when your books were coming out, when Beautiful Boy came out. I guess Beautiful Boy came out 11 years ago, and Tweak came out around then too, right? Around the same time.
Yeah, it was. Exactly. And
when I was in treatment, everybody was reading Tweak. Everybody had a copy of Tweak, and which was funny. Everybody was either reading Tweak or Scar Tissue by the lead singer of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Right. And I read both of those books while I was in there, and I was amazed with it. But I also knew of you because I was such a John Lennon fan.
Oh, man, yeah.
And I knew that David Sheff had done, I think, the last interview, right, with John and Yoko.
Yeah, it was the last big interview. They did a couple, super short radio interviews. But, yeah, I spent 3 weeks with John and Yoko while they were recording Double Fantasy and Milk and Honey, and it was 1980. The interview came out, like, the first week of December, and like so many of us, I was just watching TV, actually, and Howard Cosell was on, and he interrupted the show, whatever it was, a football game, I guess, and said, John Lennon had been shot, and I had just spoken to them the day before, and was, what can I say? Just like everybody, we were just completely horrified and shocked, and it's been, God, how many years? 80? So it's been 30 years? That's almost 40 years.
Yeah,
wow.
38 years. You were with them for weeks? I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I was lucky. I was only 24 years old. I got this big assignment. I was, pretty psyched about it, obviously. And, whereas now if you get to interview a celebrity, whether it's, somebody in music or TV or movies or whatever, you're lucky if they give you an hour. But, I walked into the studio and met with John and Yoko and basically didn't leave them for about 3 weeks. Every single day, breakfast in the morning, coffee, whatever, going for a walk in Central Park. John would get his son, Sean, who was very young at the time, get him ready to go to school. And then, I'd go to the studio with them and they would record. And, sometimes they would be working on, one of the tracks that actually is on those two records. But John, sometimes he'd just been sitting there in the corner playing the guitar, and he sort of played this, incredibly sort of plaintive, insane, intense version of Eleanor Rigby while I'm sitting there. And I'm
no way.
Sitting there, I'm here with, John Lennon, who, was one of the reasons that I survived my childhood. It's not an exaggeration. So, yeah, it was amazing.
And sure. Eleanor Rigby, Eleanor Rigby's a Paul tune too, right?
Yeah. Well, what they did, and then one of the things that was really cool during the interview was that he would talk about the fact that, some of the songs were Paul tunes and some of the songs were John tunes, but then a lot of them were a combination. And he described the way that Paul often came up with sort of a story and a little bit of a more poppy melody, and then John would come in and he would be the one with sort of the dark quietness and the thoughtfulness and sort of the discord and sort of, sounds. And so in that song, for instance, he said that it was Paul who did the, Father Mackenzie, whatever. It was, his father. Actually, it was supposed to be Father McCartney, but he changed the name because he didn't want it to be too close to his father. But anyway, so he's the one who did that and, lived in a dream bubble. And then John's the one who came in and with the, all the lonely people, where do they are? And so it was John. So it was sort of like a combination anyway. So, yeah, listening to John talk about that it was just amazing.
And the tune Beautiful Boy was on Double Fantasy, right?
Well, that's what I was going to say, that it all connects together because that song, I watched them record it. So I was in the studio watching, John record Beautiful Boy. And, Sean Lennon, his son was his beautiful boy. And then a couple of years later, I had my son Nick, and that was the song I sung to him when he went to sleep at night. And I've heard from, countless other parents who've said that the same thing. I mean, that was the song they sung, to their child as they went to sleep, their beautiful boy or their beautiful girl. And, the whole sort of, backdrop or whatever of the book is that, you have this innocent child. None of us think about what could happen to them. And it's, it could be anything from, other horrors as well, some serious illness, some, car accident, whatever. And addiction is one of them. And of course I never thought about that. And, Nick remained my beautiful boy, even as he became addicted, and would disappear, and I would be, out of my mind with worry, or he'd break into our house or our friends' houses, and, all those kinds of things. And so that song was, amazingly meaningful to me. I mean, it would have been even if I hadn't watched John record it, but that added a whole other dimension.
I was like I'm a huge rock and roll fan, but out of anybody in all of rock and roll, John Lennon is by far my favorite. And I grew up in Manhattan, and when I was in junior high school, me and my friends would go over the Dakota and like kind of dare each other to try to go upstairs to the apartment and tell the doorman that we were friends with Sean. And I would always do it. You know what I mean? I would always go to the doorman and I was like 15 and I'd be like, yeah, I'm supposed to meet up with Sean. And we'd always almost like go in, and then we'd chicken out and we'd never go in. But in one of the, I just want to ask a question real quick. When you were around John and Yoko, were they getting high? Like, I mean, in that Albert Grossman book, he has them as junkies. Was that accurate at all? He had Yoko Ono shitting in a cat box and shooting heroin all day. Was that just ridiculous, or was that what was happening?
It was ridiculous and meant to sell books. But we're also talking about the period when I was with them, and so when I was with them in 1980, by then. They'd cleaned up. I mean, they had used drugs. I mean, I don't know about the cat box, and John was very open about it. He had what he called his lost weekend, the years before I met him, when he talked a lot about drinking, so I don't know what else was going on. But,
right.
he said he was sort of trying to kill himself. He was so miserable, and it was only after those 5 years, which would have been from 1975 to about 1980, that, he and Yoko reunited. He cleaned up. He got, he was just committed to, being a father, being a husband. He talked a lot about, the joys of the simple joys, making bread, taking his kid for a walk.
Sure.
And so, I know that there was drugs for sure. I mean, a lot of drugs in the past, I don't think they hit it. So, I also feel like, people like Grossman and, many others really we're looking for a way to get headlines, and so much of the stuff that you've read is just completely
sensationalized,
made up, and some of it is way exaggerated.
And then when I read about you, because I mean, you can't read about you without you copping to the drugs that you had done as a young man. Were you smoking weed with them, or would you smoke a joint with John at all, or anything like that? Just out of curiosity.
I didn't see not one drug. I swear to you, for that whole time I was with them. That did not mean that I was, I don't know. I mean, I don't even remember what I was. I mean, I was going to say I would go back to my hotel and maybe just smoke a joint with my friends, but John never did, and there's no reason to lie about it. I mean, it's been going for a long time. I just never saw it.
Right.
I mean, you're right. used, a lot when I was growing up. And it was partly, that period around after the Lennon interview that I decided, here was one of the things that happened during that thing was as I said, I admired Lennon to the point. I mean, it sounds like you too. Growing up, it was, for me, those songs really were, I lived in Arizona and it was really bleak and it was really depressing and very conservative. And I thought, I was the only one who kind of thought differently than anybody else. And then I started to hear Lennon and it made me feel that I was not at least completely alone, not a complete freak. But
there's also just something about his voice and his songwriting that just really touched me, and his way. He had this incredible exuberance and charisma that just sucked me in. I love John Lennon.
Well, me too.
And I appreciate.
Anyway, so all I was going to say about that, and I'll say it really quickly.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's fine. But one of the things that really hit me was, okay, here's John fucking Lennon, right? He's like them beyond, anything. I mean, you could never have more of an ability to create, to do sort of whatever you want in terms of your anything. He had more money, he had more fame, and he was miserable. He tried to kill himself on drugs and alcohol for those times, that period of time. And then finally what kind of healed him was, I guess, waking up. Part of it was just that, but also making a decision to change his life dramatically and to focus on his home and having a baby. Having his son Sean, he talked about being the thing that had just changed everything for him. Once he had this child to watch out for and to raise and to be responsible for and all that kind of stuff. And so that I wasn't that stupid. I was pretty stupid, but I wasn't that stupid, and I got it. It's like, okay, so that's a lot of the reason I decided to become a father. It was, I was inspired by John. So when I did have a child, and that was Nick, and that was 1982, that was it. I mean, I wasn't high. I wasn't using then because I was, I just got it. You don't want to. I wanted to be there, fully present,
Well, I have two daughters, and I basically got clean because I have a really very, very competent father. As much as I like to make fun of him, I have an incredibly great father, and the idea of me being a junkie and having a child was just, I couldn't live with it. It was the thing that crystallized me getting clean. When Nick was growing up, so you weren't like smoking too casually when Nick was growing up. You kind of describe it in the book, like if you're at a party, you might smoke a joint instead of have a glass of wine, but it wasn't like your everything.
Yeah, it wasn't my everything, but I smoked a lot, and I had a lot of friends who smoked, and they would come to the house and people would get stoned, and we lived in San Francisco, and it was certainly not an unusual thing for people to be getting high. Nick grew up with that. I mean, he remembers it very, very clearly that it was part of our world in a way that, in past generations, maybe it was just drinking, cocktails and wine and beer or something like that. But, we smoked a lot. I did. It was, for years. And at a certain point, I did decide, that it didn't take long for me to figure it out. You know what it was? I guess I felt he would wake up in the morning early. He was a kid, he was a baby. And he just would have this like excitement vibrating off of him. It was like life. And I would have been up, late with my friends partying or whatever, and smoking weed and drinking, and I never got too much. I was never a big drinker, but anyway. And I kind of got it, and I said, that's not who I want to be. I want to, experience this joy and all that kind of stuff. And so, I did stop, and that was the period.
Right, and you were always a writer, and you were always kind of engaged with the counterculture. You interviewed Zappa and David Hockney and Keith Haring, all these amazing artists. And I know that Nick, as he was coming of age, he was really drawn by these counterculture heroes. And
totally.
And also, I know in the movie it shows you surfing. I don't remember in the book if you were actually a surfer. Were you a surfer?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was something Nick and I shared for sure.
Because that's a whole...
Steve Carell did not do me any favors. Now when I go up into the lineup, I actually went to Santa Cruz about, 4 or 5 days ago for the day, and somebody was teasing me about it because the scene in the movie when Carell is surfing, he just looks petrified and from what he told me he was.
Well, what was that like? What did you think of Steve Carell as you? Did you pick him? Who picked him?
I didn't pick him, but I was amazed by him. I mean, he's like, I was like most people who really had, I watched The Office a couple times through, all 800 episodes, and then his more dramatic roles like, The Big Short, and I loved him in Little Miss Sunshine and all that stuff. I mean, I knew he was an amazing actor, but the idea of having him or anybody play me was just weird. I mean, it was too weird, and I guess I didn't understand it until I went to the set one day. The producer asked me to come down, and I really didn't want to. I was sort of like the whole thing. And I went there and I watched him, and he got it. I mean, he was like a dad. Actually, that's what he said. I asked him when I met him actually once before that. He said to me the reason that he wanted to do this movie, he did not have drugs in his family or in his past, and his kids were young, but he related to the idea that that he was a father, and he understood when he read the script, it was like horror, and the horror was that at a certain point your kids grow up and you have to let them go and you have to let them live their lives, and you can't protect them forever. And he said it was just sort of shook him to the core, and that's what I think you see when you see him in the movie. You see a dad who's terrified. He's just terrified that his kid is going to die, and that's of course what I lived. I mean, the movie is 2 hours, and I lived it for about 10 years.
Right. And you're talking to somebody who put his father through it for at least 12 years. That same exact experience. And that's kind of like the only problem with the movie is it's too short. You know what I mean? Like it's like the book, you just feel it over and over and over again, and your misery and fear, and one of my favorite things about the movie was the music and the way you see the interplay between young Nick and older Nick and young David and older David, and and how you had to go through it. I thought that was done really well, and just seeing Nick's loneliness emerge and then you realizing it. And I think in the book, the most interesting thing was your attachment to Nick. And towards the end of it, you sort of acknowledge it as a codependency. Like, how difficult was that for you? Just to acknowledge it?
I guess it was really hard. I mean, it was obviously harder to live it than it was to look back and to write about it and then to watch it in the movie. I mean, it's all pretty surreal once, it's like somebody said it was like my life cubed when the movie came out, because I lived it and then I'd written about it and then here it was again. But that whole line about what is codependency and what is enabling, and I mean that's something I struggled with for years. And the thing that kind of killed me, actually, you know what? There are some scenes of the movie that are like devastating. Of course, watching the kid Nick, Timmy Chalamet, who plays Nick. Watching him shoot drugs is like horrific, and learning how to shoot them by going online and doing all these things that were just, terrifying. But the part of the scene in the movie that was the hardest for me to watch is the scene when Nick was out in the streets, the boy's out in the streets, and he's been gone. And so all the dad, me, Carell, again, it's all confused, weird. But all I wanted was Nick to be okay. And he called that time, and this was after years. And he called and he said, Dad, I want to come home. And I said, I'll pick you up and take you to rehab, but, that's it. And he said, I'm not going back to rehab. I've done that. I've been there. It doesn't work for me. And so I said, well, Nick, call me when you're ready to go into treatment. And I hung up, and it broke my heart. And some of the movie is fictional and sort of creative license, but that scene was exactly what happened. And when I watched it in the movie again, I realized, first of all, how lucky we were, because Nick did decide to get himself into treatment again very quickly after that. But the horror of it for me is now, Once Beautiful Boy, the book came out, I've just connected with so many people who are suffering, parents, kids, everybody. I get letters on, Twitter, private messages all the time, and, daily, many. And some of them are just, the saddest stories in the world, because it's about people who didn't make it. And the stories that kind of chill me to the bone are ones where, like, a dad called me up and said, I went to all these rehabs and I kept went to Al-Anon meetings, and they kept telling me, you have to let your kid go. You can't help them. And so he said, I did it. I shut the door. I wouldn't answer the phone. And then my son went out that night and overdosed and died. And he said to me, was that tough? Was my love tough enough? I mean,
wow.
So then I look at that thing in the movie and I think, oh my God, I hope people don't get the message that that's the way to face this when you've got somebody you love who's out there using.
Well, I think that the saddest and hardest part about it is there is no way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You do not know what you're going to do, how it's going to play itself out. My parents didn't like Al-Anon, but they wound up going to something called Families Anonymous in Manhattan. And they wound up getting into like this weird gay square dancing group called the Times Squares, and they just basically were like, leave him alone, about me, let him do what he's going to do. And I still went on, for many years. And I was just lucky I didn't die. And I think I was also lucky that it wasn't this fentanyl around, because as I'm reading your book, and I think it's weird. My favorite part of the book is the ridiculous pain at the end, where you're just so angry at Nick, and you're angry at yourself for participating in his recovery, and it's fucking pissing you off. And I just could feel it. And my friend just died over the summer from this thing, and and he was my partner on this show. And somehow I'm reading your book, and all of a sudden it popped in my head. In the middle of the summer, his girlfriend called me up to tell me that Chris had overdosed and died. And I wasn't sitting by the phone like you were. I had no idea what was happening, and I didn't believe her, and it was just like it just conjured up this memory, this incredibly visceral memory out of nothing, And I think it's...
Man, I'm sorry about it. Oh, my God. So that was Chris who you were talking about earlier?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
And him and I had met in treatment, and we started this podcast to kind of tell funny drug stories, And we were both in recovery, and we loved laughing at the stupidest shit we did. And it wound up helping a lot of people, and it wound up being a really fun way for us to, have a hobby that was giving back. Yeah. It was creative, it was service, it was everything. But Chris wound up relapsing and not being honest about it. You were sitting by the phone waiting for that phone call. Yeah,
for years. And it's not unlike a lot of other parents, or again, it's not always their parents, because that was me, but it's, it doesn't matter if you're a parent, if it's your wife or your husband or your partner or your, whoever it is. And yeah, we do. I mean, we wait by the phone. I mean, that's they tell you not to do that. They tell you to move on with your life. They tell you not to, you can't control it and all that stuff. And yeah, you can't control it, but you also can't control being worried about somebody that you love. And so, yeah, I spent years in that state of, just complete and utter. I was freaked out for years. I mean, that's what it is. I was completely freaked out and crazy, and because I was worried that whole time, like you said. I was waiting for that phone call that somebody, was going to tell me that Nick didn't make it. And as I said, he almost didn't. So I mean, there were times when, he overdosed and he was in the emergency room twice, and there was a time when he almost lost his arm because his arm had become infected because he was shooting a. So, that constant state of worry, I know it really well. And, when I see other people going through it, it just breaks my heart, because I know that that's just hell.
Yeah, totally. And Chris obviously wasn't my kid. He was my friend. And I was like, I had no idea it was happening. So it's not that similar a scenario. I just, for some reason, it conjured the feeling in me, and I just wanted to share it with you.
I get it. And it also doesn't matter if you know or not. I mean, if you know, the details were, when I read his book, and then mostly when I read his book, I didn't know a lot of the shit that happened, but it didn't matter, because I knew that he was in trouble. I guess it's different, like you said, knowing that you did not knowing that he relapsed. But that happened to me too, because, one of the things that Nick did was, like, I think everybody who's in that situation, they are pretty good at deception because they don't want people to know, because they don't want to stop and they don't want to be confronted. So there were many times that Nick would relapse, and I just didn't know for a really long time.
Well, you talk about in the book about how addiction is very much the liar's disease, which I love that. And it's the truth. You know, we all learned how to lie like fucking motherfuckers. Like Miles Davis can play the trumpet, junkies can fucking lie. And so it made me wonder, because like I really did, because I know how much you love Nick. It's obvious, you know, from all this stuff. But my favorite stuff was the anger, because the anger was so obviously the counterpoint to the love, and it made me very curious what it was like reading Tweak. Like, were you half like amazed at how good it was, but half ridiculously angry that he was living like that, or what was the experience?
Both of those for sure, but the biggest emotion I think was just devastation, because as bad as things got, I didn't know they were that bad. I mean, I didn't know that he was in situations where he could have died so many times. I didn't know that he was, hanging out with drug dealers who were, were carrying guns. And one guy, I actually don't remember if this was in Tweak or just a story he told me, but one guy who was had a crossbow and was completely paranoid on meth. I mean, so when I read Tweak, just to realize how bad it was for him and how much he suffered, that was the hardest part for sure. I was in tears. I could barely get through 2 pages, and then I'd have to stop for a while.
Right. And I think, and We All Fall Down, Nick's second book, that takes place after you and him went on the publicity tour, right?
Yeah. Well, that, you said, not knowing that your friend relapsed. Well, I didn't know Nick relapsed, but he relapsed, then, our books had come out. He was going around, talking about recovery, and he'd relapsed. What he said was that he was at, his mom took him to a party of her friends or something like that, and he said he was kind of nervous, and so he went to the bathroom, and he said, like many people who are addicted do, is he looked in the medicine cabinet almost, almost automatically without even thinking about it. And there was a bottle of Vicodin, and he took a half. He said, this will, get me through tonight. It'll sort of even me out. And then he took another half, and he came back, and pretty soon, he took the bottle. But the cool thing about that, is that it did not take him, being arrested or overdosing again. What happened was he called me up, and he said, "You can't believe what I did." And he got himself in treatment that time. So, he relapsed again, but, there are all these cliches that come in recovery, and some of them are I like, and some of them, I feel like are kind of almost dangerous, but, progress, not perfection, I think is one that really is useful. And so the idea that he could progress to the point where he could recognize that he was, that he was in trouble, so.
Well, that's another amazing thing about Beautiful Boy, the book, is the research that you did and how it really comes out everywhere in that book. Like talking about each stage of an addict's recovery and the percentage of their likelihood to get better. And I think one of the phrases that maybe you would consider as dangerous is that relapse is a part of recovery.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I kept hearing it, and I believed it, and I didn't know until later a lot of the stuff that, both, first of all, relapse isn't part of recovery. I met a lot of, necessarily, I met people who, they got clean once and they stayed sober. But then also, a lot of times people relapse because they got really shitty treatment, and so it's like, is it part of what it means to get sober? Is it part of being an addict, addicted, but or is it part of the fact that part of the reason that people, so many people don't get good treatment, and that to me is that's another dangerous message. In fact, I said the only really thing that kind of broke my heart. There's a million things watching the movie, but that's another thing that they repeat. Steve Carell says it, and I think the dad does what I did. I'm a journalist. I was doing research to try to figure out what was going on with Nick. And he, so I ended up in the, research laboratories at UCLA where they were studying meth, which was, the drug that Nick used most and sort of took him down the quickest. I heard it there too. And so in the movie he says that too. And again, it's can be true for sure, and in some ways it's reassuring, I think, to somebody who is going through it, because you realize that doesn't mean that you failed. It doesn't mean that that you're going to die. It means that it can be part of this disease, and hopefully it's time to get back and figure out what's going on and get help. But it's tricky, like you said. Actually, you nailed it before, which is to say that there aren't easy answers. It's complicated. It's they always talk about another cliche about the baffling disease, and it is.
Well, it is, and I think, like, if you didn't say relapse is part of recovery, you would just say you're fucked if you relapse, and it's like, what good does that do? You know what I mean? You might as well put a nice spin on it, Well,
and I think it's true, and it does help a lot of people. I think that whole idea. The other thing that is negative about that, or at least one thing that I've heard from people, and I don't know if it's true. I've heard this mostly from counselors, not from people who've been through it. But that the idea that by telling people that relapse is recovery, is part of recovery, it can give people an excuse to relapse, because it's like, oh, this is part of the deal, and I'm gonna, I'll be okay. I'm just gonna relapse, and then I'll go back into recovery. And I don't know if that's true. I don't know if people. I kind of don't think it's that true, because I don't think necessarily why people relapse because what anybody says to them. I think it's more the what's going on inside. But anyway. Yeah,
I mean, I loved a lot of different things you did in the book. One thing that I loved is when you used things like Harry Potter to show morality, and also to show, like, the magic of drugs and the profanity or the profundity of evil. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, and I thought I love that. And I also really loved it. This little story. I just want to go over it real quick. When you're in New York with Nick, and you go to see the Royal Tenenbaums, and you hear that what's his face? What's the guy? The singer? What's the guy that wrote that song? Fucking, I can't believe I can't think of his name.
Is it
Jackson Brown?
And in that movie, I think Marianne Faithfull does it.
No, it's Nico. Else. Nico from the Velvet Underground.
That's right.
And the line that you recognized is, "Please don't confront me with my failures. I have not forgotten them." And as an addict, and as a Velvet Underground fan, and as a Royal Tenenbaums fan, I mean, that line lived with me constantly. Okay. Yeah. So to hear you, what are you gonna say, please?
Sorry.
No, please.
No. I'm just saying. Yeah, I get it. I mean, that's kind of sums it up. What we were talking about before. We have this idea that people who are out there are out there, so having fun, and they're just all they want to do is get high. They don't care about anybody else. But no, that's not what Nick was happening with Nick, and he talks about it a lot, that he was suffering, and he already felt like a failure, and so I'm going to make him feel worse. And of course I did at first, because I didn't understand, and I think that's what happens to so many people. I mean, you said, you talked about your family and your dad, and everybody's different, but I had to learn. I mean, I keep going back to the movie because I guess it's so fresh in my mind, because it's so it's kind of new. Is that one of the cool things is that, Timmy Chalamet, who's Nick, is you never see him, look like he's out there having fun. Even at the times when he's using the most and he's, relapsed, he's gone out, he's doing, unconscionable things, you can tell that he's suffering, he's in pain, you can just see it in his eyes. And that's the whole thing. Yeah, don't confront me with my failures. I feel bad enough. And that's part of what I hate about so many of the ways that people are treated by, supposedly the treatment system. They're just made to feel worse about themselves. It's like you weren't doing it right. You weren't practicing hard enough, so it's your fault. You weren't doing
right.
Following the program with enough commitment, so it's your fault. It's you didn't. It's
that like, shame cycle kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I know what you mean, but I also liked how in the book where you brought up that quote, you were talking about your own failure too.
Yeah.
That's true. And I thought that was really deep as a father. When obviously it wasn't your fault. But it was Nick was your boy. You know what I mean? Your creation, and you did, and everything that's antithetical to parenting. Like tonight, I was helping my daughter with math homework with multiplication, and she didn't memorize the multiplication, and she wants me to do it for her, and I want to help her. You know what I mean? But to help her is not to help her. You know,
exactly.
It's that thing. It's really fascinating, and that
it's fascinating. It's so hard to be a parent. You know, I mean, no matter what happens, I mean, nobody has it, you know, easy. There's always stuff that's always challenging, and it's great, as you know, it's amazing, but it also is hard.
Right. So now you and Nick just wrote this book called High, which is everything you need. It's everything to know about drugs, addiction, and recovery.
Yeah.
So, not drugs, addiction, and dumb shit. Drugs, addiction, and recovery is your book.
Yeah. Well, drugs, addiction. I can't remember what it says. Drugs, alcohol, and addiction. And the reason that we did that book was specifically for kids because, you know, we talked to so many kids who just were so confused because it's a really hard time. You know, they hear about this addiction stuff. Well, they also hear about, you know, oh, you can't get addicted to pot. You know, alcohol, they don't believe alcohol is addictive, you know. And so what's the truth? You know, what's the truth about what is addiction? You know, what's going on? What about pills? You know, a lot of kids think that, well, they're prescription medications, so they can't be that dangerous. But, you know, we all know that they can kill you just like
heroin, you know,
like
fentanyl.
Yeah, and it leads a lot of people to heroin and fentanyl and stuff like that. So anyway, to try to, you know, explain what's going on to kids, we talked about that. We decided to do that book, and then we also, besides talking about, you know, sort of what is going on in the brain, what is about different drugs, some of those, you know, myths that I was just describing. The other thing is to really talk about sort of things that are broader than drugs, which were sort of about stress, you know, because a lot of you kids they say this in surveys, you know, the reason that they say they use is not because it's fun, but because they're really stressed out. Kind of like when parents sometimes will come home and say, God, what a day, I need a drink, you know.
Sure.
You know, it works. And so anyway, so yeah, the whole point there was to try to have a conversation with kids and really, hopefully not to just, you know, do what was in the past. I mean, we really made a big effort not to be another sort of voice lecturing at kids. It was more about, this is how, you know, Nick tells a lot about his own story. And what I hear from kids is that they relate, even if they haven't used drugs. You know, Nick talks about being just so like feeling like an alien in school growing up and stuff. And that, you know, when he finally got high, that took that horror away for a while. And so part of it is, you know, kids who are, you know, for young kids who are like in middle school, you know, read that and they may not use drugs and maybe, you know, have no intention of using drugs, but in many cases they relate to that whole thing. It's like, yeah, I feel like an alien too. So yeah, that one's what, you know, sort of the most recent thing Nick and I did, which is very cool, I think. I mean, I hope.
What I think is so funny, and you might feel guilty about it, but there's a scene in the book and a scene in the movie where, like, Nick is using, but you don't really know he's using, and he busts out the joint, and he gets you to smoke the joint with him. When he's on his way to college or after high school or whatever the moment actually was, I don't remember. But like, so that was like a moment that you felt guilty about. But here we have come full circle, and now you're writing a book about addiction with him. Like, it must be. Do you guys ever laugh about that? Is there ever like, could you? We never saw this coming. Like, what's the dialogue between you guys about this stuff now?
We laugh about it. It's hard to laugh about it because it was just, you know, so hard, as you know. But I guess we definitely talk about how, I don't know, what's the word, just how lucky we are. That's the thing, over and over again. You know, we meet people, you know, we go out and we talk together at schools or at, you know, at family and gatherings of families and communities all over the country and everything. And so many of them, as I said before, you know, are stories of people who've lost people in their lives, parents who've lost their kids. And so we feel really lucky. And I guess the thing about the movie that Nick said, separate from me, I mean, in other words, it's not like we both said it and both felt it, and then we have talked about it, which was just, once again, this reminder of how lucky we are. I mean, because, 10 years later, it's easy to put it out of your mind. It's like, it's kind of like becomes a story. Sometimes I think if you go to like AA meetings or Al-Anon meetings, you hear people talk about their years using, and it feels like there's a detachment from the emotion, because it does become a story if you tell it enough times.
Right.
And the movie, when we sat there and we kind of walked out of there like trembling, it was a reminder that this wasn't just a story. This was our lives, and we almost didn't make it. So I mean, he almost didn't make it, and of course that meant me too, because if you got a kid who doesn't make it, I mean, I see these parents, and obviously it just devastates them. And, they're incredibly brave in many cases, because I meet them and they've sort of gotten together and connected with other parents who've lost their kids and started organizations to try to save other kids' lives.
Yeah, I mean, it's nuts, like that whole experience. And like our little corner of the addiction universe is like a whole different philosophy. And like I've read a bunch of stuff where you wouldn't like Dopey on paper, but it does something to like take away the stigma of being an addict, and it adds camaraderie and recovery.
Why would I like it?
Because like the idea was to tell, like, to laugh about the stupidest shit we did high, to tell the worst drug stories and kind of laugh like we survived. You know what I mean? Like, haha.
Yeah,
like,
but I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, I think it. I don't know why that was a bad thing. I mean, it is your lives. It's just like us telling our story, I guess. And you got to laugh at shit. I mean, if you can laugh at it, that's I think probably a healthy thing. But I guess the only downside of that is that you do hear people talk about, going to AA meetings, and they have, people do what they call drunk-a-logs, and they tell about, the horror stories and how it was so fun. I mean, it wasn't so fun. I was so wasted, I almost died, and then I jumped off a building, and then I shot up some heroin, and then I didn't know where I woke up in another city, and it's not that funny, the reality, even though I get it, so I don't want to sound like it's some sort of big moral thing. It's just a take of, I think, I just feel like there's no one way to be involved in this. There's no one way to get sober. There's no one way to, I would never tell anybody who's in recovery that they're doing it wrong or they're doing anything wrong. I mean,
totally.
Whatever works. And if it's fun, I mean, if you can make some light of it, then hell, why not? I mean,
well,
you suffered it, those 12 years you said, you suffered. So you deserve some, respite there.
And just being around active addiction, it's always going to be a suffering. Over the summer, my friend Chris died. Right before he died, one of my oldest best friends died. So I lost two of my best friends this summer, and I hear about people dying constantly, and it only makes me want to make Dopey as fun as possible, because it's like I have more fun in recovery than I used to have getting high, because I can do things that I couldn't do then. And I know it's corny I think if I was me getting high listening, I would be intrigued, but I'd also be like, that dude's full of shit. But it's the truth. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I do, and I get that, and I totally. I mean, you're 100% right with that. Also, I mean, Nick talked about that too. That he didn't, because he spent his childhood or his teenage years getting high. He said that he didn't know that you could do anything. You could have fun being high, and that was one of the challenges. And I hear that from a lot of kids. It's like they can't imagine. Nick was just the other day. He was talking to somebody who was saying that he went out with some friends, and he said he did karaoke, and he said that when he never ever could have done that before unless he was drunk. And he said the idea that he could do it not drunk it just made him so happy.
Right. It's super cool. Thank you so much.
Like I was going to say, I do have to go, but I love talking to you. I'm glad we got to do it, and I'm so glad. Sorry it took so long, but it was awesome, and I hope we can do it again.
No, it was worth it, and I really, really appreciate your time, and I love your stuff. And you should tell Nick to come on. We'd love to have him on.
I will tell him. I'm going to see him tomorrow. Actually, I'm going down to LA where he lives.
Yeah, our listeners are crazy for him. So Anyway, David, thank you so much for your time, man. It was awesome to talk to you.
You too. Thank you.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
So after many years, many messages, many emails, we finally get David Sheff on Dopey. And it's incredibly satisfying to me. I've been reading his book and Nick Sheff's books since last time I was fucked up and in rehab. So it just means something to me. And I have to assume that to be the father of a drug addict must be an incredibly difficult thing to be, especially one like Nick Sheff, because Nick Sheff used everything and he just kept fucking relapsing. I know that my dad definitely had a rough time with me. And he still does to a point. I mean, he takes great pride in my recovery, and we spend a ton of time together. But lately, I've been super run down. I've been killing myself to make the show and to support the family and to work on various projects. And my dad shows up, and he's like, "You don't look so good." And I'm just like, ugh. When my dad says you don't look so good, I just want to kill him. He says, and then he says, "Are you okay? You look run down. You look tired." And what he's saying is, it looks like you're using. When my dad says that, it makes me furious. It doesn't break my heart. It doesn't make me think. It doesn't make me have empathy for him. It makes me furious. And I remember when I asked Chris if he was using, that he got furious. And everybody said when a drug addict in recovery gets furious when they're being accused of doing drugs, they're probably doing drugs. So I need to quickly backpedal and pause and give my dad some empathy. But that's what David Sheff reminds me of. We're going to try to get my dad on the show today to check in and see his experience around that. But now we have a very special treat. Member of the Dopey Nation, Louisiana tugboat mate, Mr. Whitey Tighties himself, Jeremy Turner. What's happening?
Hey, man, what's going on? How's it going?
Look at that. You're on Dopey. Isn't that exciting?
Yeah, man. Golly, finally. Yeah, man. Appreciate it. Appreciate being on here.
Right. No, you and I have been in touch for a long time, and basically some big shit is going on. Why don't you just tell the story, as best you can, like what's going on?
Well, December I had a pretty severe relapse and got into some minor legal issues, and so I kind of did what I always do and pull up my bootstraps and go back to work and try to patch holes, and I just knew for a long time that these patches ain't gonna work. I got to do a complete overhaul. So what I did was I went back to work until I got the insurance. And if
you guys don't know, Jeremy you work on a tugboat on the river, right?
Right, Mississippi River. Yeah, we push like grain barges down to the ocean. So,
So you when you get back on the boat, were you high in the first place?
About 2 years ago, I stopped getting high on the boat. Now, that doesn't mean when I would go home, I'd get really high. So, because when I stopped using at work, my using at home increased dramatically. So I would get on pretty dirty. And then, I would kind of shake back for however long I was staying, 30, 40 days. Yeah.
I know this is not like on the path of this story, but why did you stop getting high on the boat?
Well, it was kind of a promotion. The boat that I got onto, the first one, was like a party boat. We didn't pass Memphis on the river without dropping the little skiff to go get heroin. I mean, we were wild. And then they kind of cleaned house, and I got an opportunity to be a mate. And the captain sat down with me and said, "Look, you're not going to get this position unless you stop doing all drugs out here. I want a clean boat." So I made that commitment, and I stopped doing it. And I had one slip in 2 years. But, you're right. When I get back, I'm usually hot.
So you come back from the relapse, you get on the boat, and what happened?
Okay, so I just grind it out and just wait for the insurance, because it took 90 days for the insurance to kick back in. And a couple weeks ago, I started talking to Aloe about going there, seeing if there was an opportunity for me to go there.
But what made you decide to go to treatment at all? Because you've been running around for years, trying to do different things, geographic moves, going to meetings, trying different things out, recommitting. And so, what's different this time? What was it about this relapse or where you are in your life or whatever that you're going to go to a different state to check in? Because you haven't gone to a long-term facility. When's the last time you did that?
Well, I haven't done a long-term facility. It's probably been several months, and several years.
Yeah.
I went to a place called Centacor in Baton Rouge, and it's like and you work, and it's not really a rehab.
I think that's where Jed went, right, from Church and Other Drugs. Yeah.
He told the story. You're right. Yeah, my moniker on my email is split T, which is if you leave the program, they that's what they call you, is a split T. So. But yeah, it's been years. I went to a 28-day facility about 10 years ago, and I had 7 months clean when my dad, he died of an overdose, and I relapsed then. So yeah, it's been about 10 years.
All right. So what makes you want to do it now?
Well, man, Mike, I'm starting to scare myself. I'm using a lot. I don't even measure anything out. I'm just going till I can't go anymore. My health is starting to deteriorate. I'm not getting any younger. And, man, I just got so much I want to do. I want to play music. And I don't know, anything. I'm capable of anything. And I see myself wasting a lot of time, man, doing the same stuff over and over. And it's frustrating. And I just can't do it anymore. I really can't.
So it's exciting. And you were you shooting meth or smoking it? What were you doing? What was the deal?
No, I would ingest it. I just eat it.
You'd eat the meth?
Yeah, eat it or I plug it.
Really? You put up your butt?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Dude, it hit you quick, for real. Yeah,
so out of every way you did meth, putting it up your butt was your favorite?
It wasn't my favorite necessarily. Okay. The intense high of it, yes, definitely was. But yeah, none of it's good. Really.
It doesn't matter. Wait, hold up. What was the first time that you decided to stick the meth up your butt?
It was about 3 years ago, and I was with a girl, and that was her primary way. That's the only way she would do it. And I was shooting it, and she said, she told me it was more intense, and so I said, well, I'll try anything once. So I kind of migrated to that because I can't shoot up no more, man. It kind of sickens me to shoot up now. I don't like doing it. So
it sickens you. You know what, Jeremy? Hold on.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you're saying years ago you would inject meth, and your girlfriend was like, fuck that shit, stick it up your butt, it's more powerful.
Correct.
And you found that to be the case.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it was, definitely. Mm-hmm.
Amazing. And like now needles kind of skeeve you out, and the butt thing is working. And like
needles always did that to me, though. I never really liked shooting up because it's just I always thought it was kind of gross. So
well, it is gross, Yeah. I what I liked about shooting up was I liked the science fiction of it, that you're mixing this mixture with your blood, and you have this apparatus, and you're shooting it back into yourself, and then you're changed. Like the super fantastic thing of it. Like, you know what I mean? I always love that aspect of it.
Yeah. Well, until you miss, and then it's a nightmare. Well, meth it is,
Oh, it's so painful. Yeah, I used to shoot meth. It's very painful and gross.
Yeah. Exactly. But yeah.
So when you're sticking meth up your butt, you're doing it with like a piece of glass, like a piece of the crystal? Like how does it, or do you crush it up? What do you do?
Well, you could take a syringe and you cut the needle off completely where it's just like a little spout. And then you're
squirting the liquid up your butt.
You're squirting the liquid right in your rectum. Correct. That's correct.
I can't believe I never heard of this until now. I must be like an innocent. I'm like a babe in the woods in this world.
There you are. Yeah, well,
anyway, more importantly, though, you want recovery. You don't want to shoot fucking meth water into your asshole anymore. So you want recovery now, right?
Man, I want life, dude. I want to freaking hang out with people and be because, dude, I'm not, I work on a boat, so when I come home, I don't really have friends or people I hang out with. I have no social life. So, and I got out of jail 4 years ago. I have had no social life since, 2011 I went to jail?
Right.
Dude, I'm 40 years old, man. I'm not getting any younger.
How much do you think turning 40 affected you like that? Like psychologically?
maybe not so much for it. Yeah, it did a little bit, but I think when I got 8 years, when I was 32 and I got 8 years, and I said, man, that's the rest of my 30s. That's when it, I was like, man, I just effed the last part of my, the prime of my life. I'm fucking in jail, I mean, it still didn't stop me, It really didn't.
Well,
So,
if it makes you feel any better, I basically wasted the prime of my life too. So for whatever that's worth, a lot of us do. And then you get out and you find that the prime of your life is something different.
right. Yeah, definitely.
You know what I mean? Like, so how long has it been since you put meth up your butt?
Yesterday? Oh my God.
Was it yesterday?
Yeah, man.
Yesterday was the final day.
Right. Yeah.
And where you were at home?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And were you alone?
Yeah. Oh yeah, man. Dude, I'm an isolator, dude. I isolate. I have nobody around.
Yeah, it's not that joyful, I'm sure.
No, man, it's terrible. It's terrible. I don't even, dude. I sit in my room and think about why. What is so attractive about this that I keep doing it? But I'm just like, I don't know.
What do you come up with?
I come up with that something's fucked in my head, man. I've gone, I just hadn't removed myself from it long enough, man. I just hadn't put 100% into it because, I didn't want recovery till about, I'm going to say a year and a half, 2 years ago is when I really started. That's when I started listening to, I started listening to recovery podcasts. I found Dopey last year. And, I'm like you. I was listening to a lot of Artie on Howard and stuff. So,
yeah. Fucking, what was I going to ask you? I think most importantly, like, you're going to go to this place, you're going to meet a ton of new people, you're going to feel uncomfortable, and you might get freaked out. You need to just fucking, whatever you do, don't react.
Right.
Don't fucking run away from it. Because, like, you've done a lot of work and a lot of, like, brave fucking work to get yourself to go halfway across the country and try something different because you want to change your life. There's going to be so many things there that make you not want to do it, not want to stay. Don't succumb to those thoughts. Just fucking stay no matter what. No matter what, you just fucking stick it out. Even if somebody fucks you over, or if somebody talks shit, or if anything goes wrong, you say, fuck it, I'm going to stay no matter what.
Dave, I'm going to be in Malibu, bro.
I mean,
really? Is that not that's a dream, isn't it? I mean, it's crazy.
I would lower all your expectations.
No, I mean, I know what you're saying, man. I do.
Because you have a dream. I mean, like, dude, you know what I mean.
It's going to be hard work. I know it. I understand it. I mean, you got to understand, man. I go on a boat. I come home and get high for 2 or 3 weeks, and I go back on a boat and do what I call the 28-day shake back, and I've gotten so used to doing that it's, it doesn't bother me anymore. Right. It's, that's why I think I need a little more time than
I think you need the time too. I'm just saying, and when I say hedge your expectations, that's just my personal philosophy about anything. Right. If I get an idea that something's going to be a certain way and I'm scared, I don't want to be disappointed if it's not. I want to expect the worst and hope for the best, because if something fucking is terrible, I don't want to be like, I thought this was going to be the time of my life, or I thought this was going to be perfect, especially in your situation, because that's something that, like, addicts do, that we can do to set ourselves up to fail. Like, we set up a fantasy that can't possibly be, it can't be actualized. And then that little thing in your head is like, well, sticking the fucking meth up my butt, you know what that's going to be like. You know what I mean? So, like, I always say hedge your fucking expectations just to be safe, just as a safety protocol,
But, Dave, the mental exercise I've done to prepare for this, and I think I said this before we started recording, was I have had to accept 100% that I'm changing everything. Like, I knew I wasn't ready. That's why I didn't even bother going. Remember, I was talking to you in December, and you were like, man, go to treatment. I'm like, no, I'm going to go to treatment, because I knew I wasn't ready.
Right.
You have to, there's a certain, like, sweet spot when you're in your active addiction. There's a sweet spot to go to recovery. You got to be able to receive it, man. And there's a certain point. You're not ready to receive that shit. I am so goddamn ready right now, man. It's insane.
No, I know what you mean. I know exactly
I'm
what
ready.
you mean.
So,
well, I'm psyched for you, and
I am too, man. I'm happy. I'm so relieved, man. God, I can't wait to get on the plane.
and what's the protocol out there? How, like, what are the rules like? Like, what are you allowed to do? What aren't you allowed to do? Who are you going to stay with? What's going to happen?
I think there's 3 treatment houses, and I don't know if they're different phases or if it's. I don't really know the gist of it. I know that after a certain period, they can give you your phone back and let you, do social media and stuff like that. So I think they're a little different. They have Sheff, and I don't really know much about it right now.
I know that they offer sound bath therapy, and they have equine therapy and some sort of surfing thing and all this sort of fucking cool shit. Because Aloe is now our big sponsor. So like, I'm psyched that you're going. It better be good. If it's not good, we're fucked.
Well, man, dude,
you gotta lie.
I'm gonna report back to you.
If it's no good, you have to lie about it so we can still make our money.
Well, man, I'm telling you, man. Well, I listen to Bob. I tell you what, Bob Forrest has a podcast. He did Don't Die. If you go back, anybody listen to the one on Christmas Eve, and it's so moving. It was one of them podcasts that I listened to 3 times because I was like, man, this dude is talking to me. And a lot of the things that he was frustrated with about the places, treatment centers, is his frustrations were my frustrations. So this place was for me. It was meant to be. I'm grateful that I got in.
No, and I love Bob, and those guys have been only cool with me and with Dopey.
Yeah,
I just also want you to like be okay with fucking giving the phone up,
Right.
fucking.
Oh, I am. Man, I was ready to do it the whole time. I didn't care, man.
Right.
Look, I'm ready.
Put social media on hold. Put all that shit on hold and get in your body and be you. Yeah. And it's a fucking amazing opportunity. And and I'm just happy for you. And I'm happy, that you get an opportunity to go to California and you get an opportunity to like actualize some recovery and to change your life. It's fucking cool as hell. I
know, it's exciting. It is.
I want you to tell the violin story, but maybe now's not the time.
I can tell it. It's a little convoluted, but
is it too crazy to tell, or you want to tell it?
No, I can kind of sum it up. When I went to college at Southeastern Louisiana University, I started learning how to play piano. I brought my guitar in one of those little piano rooms, and I taught myself chords on the piano. So I took Adderall at the time, and I taught myself how to play piano. So if you fast forward a crack addiction, and 7 years later, I'm at LSU doing the same thing, but I wasn't going to LSU, right? I was in a halfway house doing a drug treatment, like a little drug treatment place. And I started getting high at this halfway house, and I had nothing to do during the day, and I didn't have a car. So I would just walk to LSU with my book sack and go in the little practice rooms and just play piano. I just get spun out and play piano.
Yeah.
And so there was this girl, she was teaching me some things. She worked with me, and she told me one day, she said, there's this theater downstairs, and they got this big grand piano, and it sounds so beautiful, and she really hyped it up. I said, okay. So one night I was spun out. And
Jeremy, are you a good piano player?
No, not really. I mean, I know how to play chords. I do all right,
Yeah, okay. I'm with you.
I'm no Paul McCartney, but I went down to the theater, and they were refurbishing the theater. Okay, and I had just got in the car, and they had tools. They had a bunch of tools all over the place. I mean, it was bags and bags of tools. And so I stole all the tools out of there, and I hit them that time. So a couple months later, I said, man, I bet them instruments are worth some money too. So I went back. And I got them for some trumpets. I stole some trumpets that time. And so then a few months later, I went back.
Well, how many trumpets did you take?
2 of them. I got it was a brass one, and then it was a silver plated one, and they were worth $10,000.
Shut the fuck up. Who'd you sell them to?
Oh, pawn shops. I mean, dumb shit.
How much did they give you for them?
Okay, like a few $100 each time I went.
Right.
So the tools I kind of sold here and there, and got, I made a lot of money off tools. So then I went there one time. It was right before the Christmas break, and I think it was 2009, and I went to Christmas break, and I had these bolt cutters in my jogging pants, and I walk in the door, and now this class is going on. People are going down the hallways, and I pop open 3 lockers, and I get this violin, this PA system, this little amp, and I struck out, and So I came about a week later.
Wait, what do you mean? Wait. What do you mean you struck out?
I left.
Okay. I'm with you.
With the instruments. So I just went and pawned them. And so about a week later, I was at my girl's house, and she was waking up, going to work, drinking some coffee. She left the room to go brush her teeth, and I'm watching the news, and they're like, the violin bandit is on video, and I'm thinking, oh shit, they're about to show my face on the news. And anyways, they didn't show an angle. They didn't really catch me. They didn't show my face on the news, so I didn't think they got me. So I got busted.
So wait, it was a whole story where this
Right.
What was the violin? Was it some special violin?
Okay. Yeah, the violin was like 100-something years old. It had been passed down in this Chinese girl's family for years. And she brought it with her to America to play violin at LSU. And she was one of the top violinists in the nation. And she came back from a Christmas break and didn't have a violin.
And she wasn't expecting some dude who sticks crystal meth up his ass to wind up stealing the prized violin.
Right. Yeah. No, not at all. So they actually had a guy call in to the news station. Said, look, I want you to take that girl to a music store. I want her to buy any violin she wants. She went and bought her a $25,000 Stradivarius. I mean, she got a brand new one. Okay. So if you fast forward now a year from that point is when they finally all called. Because, see, I had moved to New Orleans, and I was doing all right. I wasn't clean, but I wasn't stealing anymore.
So we're saying a year had gone by since you stole the violin. And you can't possibly imagine getting busted for taking that violin. It was over in your head, right?
Right. In my head, it was over, big dog. It was over. And
so what happened?
Well, I was on probation because I got caught with a meth lab, which is a different story.
Wait, you got caught with a meth lab?
Yeah, but man, we can't go into that.
But did you just say you were doing all right and you were barely using, except for the fact that you had a meth lab?
If I gave you the timeline, I stole the violin in December of 2009, right?
Yeah.
I got caught with the meth lab in January of 2010. I got out of jail that May or June. So I got out of jail, got on probation, and I think it was I don't know, I forget when it was when I got caught, but I had been out of jail and already back on probation, doing all right when I got busted for the violin. Yeah, there was a lot of shit going on.
How did they find out?
Well, when you pawn something, they go to resell it, right? So when they got this violin and had those serial numbers on it, so they got a guy that researches these things, and the guy went to research and he found the Crime Stoppers, the article on it, and so he sent pictures and they verified that it was hers, and they come and picked me up in New Orleans and arrested me at my job, and they had they brought me straight to the press conference. It was embarrassing, dude. It was bad. Yeah, I was shocked. Definitely.
Wow. That's a crazy story.
That's crazy, dude.
What do you call it when you stick meth up your butt? What's it called?
I guess you can call it plugging.
You call it plugging.
Or boofing. Some people call it boofing.
Yeah, boofing. What did Chris would call it? Hooping the shooter. But you wouldn't be hooping. You wouldn't be hooping the meth. Right?
Well,
would you be hooping it?
Hooping the shooter is when you put the needle in your ass, isn't it?
Right, but that was like holding the needle so you could shoot up later. It wasn't like getting high like that.
That's the best. Yeah, that's great. Great.
So this episode of Dopey, we open with this song, and I didn't get to thank him. This guy Jake, the dude who does from West Virginia, who did that Good So Bad on the banjo. You know that guy?
Right. Yeah, I remember that. Hell yeah.
And he wrote a little tune about Dopey, and it's beautiful. And we're going to open the show, so it already played. But he mentions you, and he mentions some characters on the show, and it's beautiful. And I'm just psyched you're on your way to do your thing, and and I'm excited for you, Jeremy. And I wish you the fucking best.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. I definitely do. And good luck to the Dopey Nation. Stay strong. Definitely. I'll be thinking of y'all.
And when you get your privileges back, you drop me a fucking line and you let me know how you're doing.
I will, man. I definitely will. Thank you.
And it's always great to, I don't know, one of the coolest things about Dopey is just to be in touch with people. And and I've always loved being in touch with you, and you've always provided the show with some fucking amazing stories. And I know that people really they relate to you, and they love to hear from you, and I love that. So I just want to thank you. And and right on.
That's awesome. Appreciate it, Dave, man. Take care, buddy.
Jeremy, be in touch, all right? Let me know what the fuck happens.
I will, man. Take
All
it
right,
easy, man.
bud. You too.
All right.
Bye.
So I think that was a very important segment with Jeremy Turner. I think that's really what Dopey is supposed to be about. You know, Jeremy is he knows he's at the end of the rope with this thing, and he wants to get help, and he admitted he needed help, and he actually is taking the next action to go to fucking treatment and deal with his situation. And I know that there's a bunch of you guys listening who might be on the fence about doing it for yourself. But just know that all you have to do is make the decision, and then you need to make a phone call, and you need to follow through, and you can make your life a little bit better. So here we go, Dopey voicemail. We've heard a lot of recovery. We've heard the father's opinion. And my dad, as much as he always wants to come on Dopey, he's too fucking sick to come on. I went home the other day to his house, and he was like, and he hit me with the same thing. You don't, he sounds like he's dying. He's like, you don't look too good. I'm like, Dad, you sound like you're dying. He's like, I'm okay, but you don't. I said, how about if you say, I said, Dad, you know how angry it gets me when you say you don't look good? He says, well, you don't. And I said, well, how about this? I don't want to get angry at you, because if I get angry at you, you think I'm using. So how about this? Why don't you say, David, it looks like you're working too hard. And he smiled like super big. And he was like, that's very smart, David. I'll make you an offer you can't refuse. And I actually had some Dominican chicken soup. They call it sancocho. And I gave him the Dominican chicken soup. And simultaneously, he was cooking his own chicken soup. So I took the Dominican chicken soup back, and I mixed it with the Jewish chicken soup. And I had the ultimate hybrid of cultural cold remedies while my dad suffered with his cold. And that's a little story. Now here is the Dopey voicemail of the week. It's from this guy, Steven. It's very debaucherous and very dopey. So check it out. He's from Baltimore.
Hey, what's up, Dave? What's up, Dopey Nation? This is Steven calling from Atlanta, Georgia. Originally from just outside of Baltimore. And love the show, love the Dopey voicemails, so figured I would go ahead and contribute one. So it was probably my third or fourth time in treatment. I had made it through detox, and all of a sudden my libido that had been stifled and stuffed down by shooting massive amounts of heroin for so long woke up with a vengeance and wound up getting me into some trouble with one of the female patients. And we got caught. And both of us were politely asked to leave. And mind you, it's about 11 o'clock at night when this happened. And there was no way that I was going to be calling my parents, letting them know what had happened or anything. And I knew I still had probably a couple $100 in my bank account, which was very unusual. But for whatever reason, I had some money, so I said, fuck it. They said, we have a driver that'll take you anywhere that you want to go, but you can't stay here. And I was in some treatment center in like Western Maryland. And I said, take me to West Baltimore. And they were like, all right. So I get in the car with this old man who was like a driver for the rehab. And we made the trip. It was like an hour and a half down to the city. And I had him drop me off in Edmondson Village, which is... basically, it's like The Wire. I mean, it was, open air drug markets and corner boys and all that good stuff. And, that was my spot. So I had him drop me off in Edmondson Village. It's after midnight by this point. And I got my backpack slung over my shoulder and managed to find an ATM and get the last of the money out of my bank account. And I'm on the hunt. So I'm looking around. There's not really much going on. It's pretty late. And I come across this woman. And, kind of my MO was always like, if I was ever in a new spot or a new part of town and I didn't really know the score, a good place to start is usually to talk to a prostitute, because chances are they know exactly where the good shit is. And, I feel less threatened dealing with a woman on the streets of West Baltimore at 1 o'clock in the morning than some random strange guy. So I meet this girl. We start talking, tell her I'm looking for dope. She's all about it. She says, yeah, no problem. I got the hookup. I follow her for a couple blocks. She ducks off in the alley, comes back with a couple pills of dope. And, she says, come on, follow me back to my spot and we can go get high. So we go back to her spot, and her man, I guess, boyfriend, husband, whatever, this dude named Billy was there. And we came in, we all got high, everything was cool, very pleasant. We shot up the dope, and then all of a sudden, I start getting this real fucking weird vibe from Billy. Like, he is just not feeling the fact that I am in his house this late at night. I think in his mind that I was, like, tricking with his girlfriend, which he obviously didn't like. That was not the case, but there was really no talking to him about it, and things just got weird, and I was kind of like, maybe I should get the fuck out of here. And so I said I'm going to go, and the woman, her name was Tammy, was like, well, where are you going to go? Didn't really have an answer, and she said, well, come on, you can stay at my girl's house. I'll take you down there. And we went a couple blocks down to a friend of hers, who I assume was another prostitute, and she knocked on the door. She was still up, let me in the house, and did a little introduction. I still had some dope, so obviously I was welcome. And I went to this woman's house, and it was basically, she was squatting in an abandoned house. I'm pretty sure Billy and Tammy were too, but that's another story. So I come into this woman's house, and there's no electricity, no running water, this abandoned row home in West Baltimore, and she's got 2 kids, and her kids are like probably 9 and 12, something like, definitely old enough to like be aware of what the fuck was going on, and were definitely giving me the stink eye, and didn't seem to be thrilled that some stranger was in their mom's house, probably again. So I go inside, Tammy leaves, her and I sit down, we do some more dope. I'm feeling pretty good at this point, and I'm ready to just kind of nod off and go to sleep for the night. And she says that she's got to go out. I'm assuming she's probably got to go turn some tricks and get some more money or whatever she's going to do, but it's like 3 o'clock in the morning by this point, so I can't imagine why else she's going out. And she leaves me alone in this row home with her 2 kids who are still awake. And I'm high as shit. My body's completely clean, so I'm fucking nodding off, high as shit. There's candles all over the place. It's really fucking weird. And the kids kind of, disappear and go to bed or whatever, and eventually I fall asleep. And I wake up to, I'm on the top floor. I'm kind of in this broken recliner, like laying back, just nodded off. And I wake up to the sound of the creaking of the floorboards, footsteps in the room, and I'm awake. And once I put together exactly where I am and, and what's going on, because mind you, I was fucked up out of my mind when I fell asleep, I realize that, like, there's somebody else in the room with me, and I can barely see the silhouette of a very large man through, like, the street lights and the moon coming in through the window, and, like, just a little bit I can tell somebody's in the room, and immediately I panic. So I don't move. I try to be real quiet, and this dude is walking around, like, bumping into things, and I'm fucking terrified, dude. I'm in my mind, like, I'm about to get fucking got. This was my first, like, real experience, kind of actually being on the streets and not just driving into the hood to cop drugs and then leave. So I'm terrified, dude. I am fucking shook. And eventually, he starts flickering a lighter, and he lights a couple candles, and he turns and he sees me laying in this fucking chair, and he jumps, and I jump, I'm terrified, and he comes walking over. And he leans in real close, and I'm thinking this dude's going to fucking stab me, cut my throat. I don't know. And he just says, hey, man, you want to smoke some crack? And immediately I said, absolutely. And it turned out, I found out the next day that the woman I was staying with, her name was Martha, I think. And this was like her brother. And he was just coming in the middle of the night to get fucking high in her abandoned spot. And me and her brother ended up smoking crack for the next, 4, 5, 6 hours till after the sun came up, out of a broken car antenna. It was a fucking mess, dude. Like, we didn't have a stem. None of the stores are open. And he had this metal broken car antenna. And, there's no electricity, so there's candles. It's not well lit. We're trying to pass this thing back and forth, but we both want another hit so bad that we can't wait until it cools off. Like, I ended up with these huge blisters on my fucking fingers, on my fucking mouth from just trying to pass and hit this fucking thing while it was still like this glowing hot piece of metal. And this is within like 6, 7 hours of getting out of treatment. And I'm like on Skid Row already. I think eventually I picked up the phone, called mom and dad, pulled the ripcord, so to speak, and was able to like go home, get a shower, and consider my options. Eventually, when I would make that call, they just wouldn't answer. Like, there was no more fucking ripcord for Steve, and I would come to spend a lot longer stretches out there on the street living that way. But those are stories for another day. As of today, I'm working on just under 10 months clean and sober. Been in and out of this thing for probably 16 years or so. So, man, I love the show. I love what y'all are doing. And keep it up, man. And toodles.
All right, thank you, Steven. I love that voicemail. I love just about everything about that voicemail. It really takes me back to burning my hands and my lips on meth pipes and fucking being in bad places late at night. I would always freak out if I had a lot of money, or if I got money before I knew where I was going to cop, when it was like that danger, like that I could get robbed, or like that, you know, maybe you're going to get beat, maybe you're going to lose, you know, your money and not get good dope, or but the worst thing is the idea that somebody's going to rob you or hurt you. And it's crazy that with all the copping that I used to do, that I never got robbed like that. I mean, I got beat and I got like fake drugs, or somebody would take my money and disappear, but I never got attacked, which was miraculous considering I was always copping in scary neighborhoods in Brooklyn or the Lower East Side or downtown LA. And I guess, you know, I was lucky and violence wasn't a part of the shit that happened to me. I was talking this morning with this guy who's a Dopey Nation guy, and we were talking about cravings and stuff. And I was saying to him how I don't want to get high. You know what I mean? And he was like, really? And I was like, yeah, I said, I might want to smoke weed once in a while because I smell weed all the time and I love how weed smells, but I don't want to do heroin. I really don't. Like, I feel like if I did heroin, it would just make me sick. Like, I would get nauseous. I would have to figure out a way to reacclimate myself to the drugs. But I kind of, then I felt fine with that answer. And I said the same thing about pills, and I felt fine with that answer. But during the day, I just kept looking back on it and imagining getting high. And the truth is, and it's something I don't talk about on Dopey very often because I'm very, very happy in sobriety. But the truth is that I loved getting high. I remember when I would come home from work, even when I was separated from my family, I would come home from work and I had money and I'd have dope, and I would like get high on dope, and I felt like I was on top of the world, and I would like watch a TV show or eat something sweet, and I felt like I was on top of the world. But the thing about it is, that's just a moment. And the next moment is going to be bad. And as soon as you run out of money, it's going to be bad. And as soon as you have a tolerance, it's going to be bad. Because the reality is you can get high, but you can never sustain getting high. It's bullshit. You know, so like that's the answer to that question of like why I don't have cravings. It's because there's no chance that I could ever sustain a lifestyle of getting high. And it was just something I was thinking about. Because, like, yes, I love to get high. Yes, I love to be sober. But that's really the issue, is it's impossible to sustain such a thing as a heroin habit or even a pill habit. I just would take too many and they wouldn't work. And I would never feel the actual high of my life. I just think it's worth talking about it because we can preach recovery and blah, blah, blah. But I am an addict and I used to love taking drugs, and I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate to that, or maybe you can't. But I just wanted to say that and get it off of my chest or my mind or whatever. And here's a little email I just got from, we'll call her Deanne in Texas. She writes, "Dear Dave, I learned about your podcast while I was listening to This American Life. As soon as I heard the story, I downloaded episodes of your show and I am hooked. I switched back and forth between the latest episodes and the oldest episodes. The episodes with Chris are hysterical and the new episodes are poignant. Great company and often still hysterical. I love it when Alan makes an appearance. Unfortunately, he's too sick tonight to make an appearance. But anyway, I have been sober 7 years, and while I have worked my way back into normal life and rejoined the living and the functioning regular humans, I stay extremely close to my roots as an addict alcoholic. I attend meetings every single day. I use the program all day long. That may sound burdensome to some people, but for me, it is a relief. The real, easier, and softer way. Your podcast feels like home. No one understands the lengths we will go to for the high, and we will do the dumbest shit to achieve even 5 minutes of getting high or drunk or whatever. Your podcast is a completely safe place to hear and tell the stories. It's like being in the rooms where we can laugh at all the dumb shit because we are so relieved to be living on the other side. I wasn't laughing when I was in it, but I can now. Your show is comfort for people like me. I am a person that lives a life beyond my wildest dreams because of my sobriety, and a person that never wants to forget how I got here. 2 lives in 1 lifetime. Thank you. I've turned some friends onto the show. We are grateful for your dedication and so sorry for your losses. Stay strong, Dopey Nation, and toodles for Chris. Best day. Deanne in Texas. I love that email. It's a beautiful, beautiful email. I love the idea that Dopey is home for people, and I love the idea of 2 lives in 1 lifetime. I often feel like it's 1,000,000 lives in 1 lifetime, just infinite lives, and it's crazy. Now, before we go, I just want to so thank you, Deanne. I think that's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful email. I want to read a couple of reviews before we go. Gotten a ton of great reviews, and I'm going to read some. There was a bad one recently. I got to find the bad one. I don't know. I can't find the bad one. Here's a good one. It is from... Where is it from? Better Than Rehab by Dr. Z-Pep. 5 stars. I recently got into listening to Dave and Chris. I was instantly in love with the 2 of them. I struggle with addiction, and it helps to have something to laugh about. Dave, I'm so sorry about Chris. Although I'm not religious, my heart goes out to all of you guys. Much love, and thanks for the wonderful show. Thank you. That's nice. Yeah, I listen to the old episodes, and it makes me crazy. I miss Chris a lot. It would be so much better if he hadn't died, obviously. It just seems like such a stupid thing to say. I miss him and Todd every day, and but it's the reality of this thing that drugs kill you, and that... and I say this all the time. The one thing that really killed Chris was that he couldn't be honest, which is very sad. And I love Chris, and I totally miss him. One more review before we go. I like this one. I am the Dopey equivalent. This is from UC Pete, the realest and funniest podcast out there. 5 stars. I'm the Dopey equivalent of a touchhead. The Grateful Dead fans that hopped on the train late in the game when the Touch of Grey music video came out. I started listening after hearing about Dopey on This American Life. It's saddening and daunting to know that Chris is dead while I listened back from the beginning. I'm on episode 106 now after starting the earliest available episode, number 30. Now, you guys, if you're listening to Dopey and you never listened to episodes before number 30, just go to either the Podbean app or go to dopeypodcast.com. All the episodes except for episodes 6, 8, 10, and 12 are there. On iTunes, for some reason, it starts at 30. But if you want to hear the episodes before 30, go to dopeypodcast.com or to Podbean. Anyway, especially when the jokes foreshadowing his inevitable relapse and death littered throughout the early episodes. Yeah, that's a very sad fact. While not afflicted, and certainly not to the degree that Dave and Chris and others are, this show has been a revelation for me and has made me more mindful of my behavior and the behavior of friends and family when it comes to drugs and alcohol. It's no surprise how many folks have been helped by the catharsis and laughs this show provides for those in need. I've got some extremely dopey stories, some of my own, others about friends, but I'll save those for when I've caught up to real time. Rest in peace, Chris and Todd, and I trust Dave is staying strong and hope that the show is still going strong now. I also hope that reading fan voice memos is still a thing when I reach the present episodes, as I've got some funny ones to share. Thanks, Dopey. Pete. Thanks, Pete. Yeah, everybody, send in a fucking voicemail, leave a review. Chris loved reviews on iTunes. Don't leave bad reviews. They destroy my world. And send in a song, send in some art, follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Reddit. There's a crazy fight in the Reddit world between New York Upstate Engineer and Applebottom. I think Applebottom just left Reddit, which breaks my heart. But only dopey Redditors know what I'm talking about. I just want to thank David Sheff for finally coming on. I want to thank the great Jeremy Turner and wish him the best of luck at Aloe. I want to thank Steven for the voicemail, Pete for the review, Deanne for the wicked fire email. I want to thank Jake for that sick tune on into the Dopey show at the head of the show if you're feeling high or feeling low. I want to thank everybody in the Dopey Nation for being a part of the show. You guys know who you are. Oh, yes, I want to give a shout out to James in England. Fucking James in England is like this guy, alcoholic in recovery. He writes me every once in a while, and he always starts with "Evening, Dave." And I just like hearing from James, so I want to give him that shout out. I want to give Matt a shout out, and some guy called Juice a shout out. I think that was his name, right, Matt? If I'm wrong, write me an email because I can't find yours. Write me an email and let me know the proper shout out. Everybody else, you guys know who you are. Stay strong, Dopey Nation, and fucking toodles for Chris.
I want to take a walk around the world. I wonder would it do me any good? Until I get some money in my pocket, then I guess I'll just have to walk around my neighborhood. But I want to be good so bad. Want to be so good, so bad, so bad. I want to be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had. And I want to take a ride up in the sky. Watch this aeroplane just pass me by. And I want to see a Lear jetliner take a dive, just to show all of these people what it means to be alive. But I want to be good so bad. Want to be so good, so bad, so bad. I want to be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had. And my shadow's getting smaller and smaller. And it's time to where I stand. Shadow's getting smaller and smaller. And it's time to where I stand. And I wonder would they pay it any mind when I leave this busted city far behind. I'll take the high road, however far it winds, because peace and love are very, very, very hard to find. And I want to be good so bad. Want to be good so bad, so bad. I want to be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had. Damn it, all these suckers make me mad. And it's all I ever had. And it's all I ever had. And these suckers make me mad, and I want to call my dad, and it's all I ever had, and it's all I ever had, and it's all I ever had. And it's all I ever had. And these suckers make me mad, and it's all I ever had, and I want to call my dad, and it's all I ever had, and it's all I ever had. And it's all I ever